Let's go for a walk. It's Wednesday, May 6th, almost exactly 8 p.m. in the evening. I wasn't really sure I was going to go for a walk today because it's been a pretty cold, somewhat rainy day, and I had a long work day. I didn't quit till a little while ago, but I got out, decided it wasn't cold enough to keep me inside, almost. It's kind of hard coming out on these days that are getting cold after having warmer days, but it's still nice. The sun's poking through a little bit here. The sky is almost completely overcast, but there's a few blue spots peeking through. It's been a pretty good day. Trying to figure out which way I want to go today. Maybe we'll go this way. I don't know if we went this way before. Not sure what to talk about today. Maybe we'll keep it a little on the down low, not talk so much. But if something comes to mind, I will. It's always interesting. I'm just going to get a shot of the parking lot here first. You can see that there's very few cars here at night. I'm almost always one of them. Sometimes I'm the only one. Oh, it looks like there's 4 cars here tonight. It's just kind of interesting. It's the evening crew at Holden. Die-hard hikers, I guess. My favorite time to come is either early in the morning or late at night because it is more isolated and peaceful. Not that I have anything in particular against people, but when you're contemplating or just relaxing or just having some quiet time, sometimes it is better just to be by yourself. You can probably tell there's already changes on these trees that I'm noticing from just the videos a few days ago. Like that tree on the right, the leaves are actually coming out now, and they were closed up a little bit. So things are just gradually coming back to life. It's a cool process to watch. Just getting a sense for how green everything is. And then we'll get some more colors with all the flowers. Sometimes it's kind of interesting talking until you don't have anything more to say and the words just kind of die out. I think that's also a really important observation, even when exploring a question or when having a dialogue between two people. Sometimes you start out really invigorated with a lot to say, a whole bunch of words come out. Maybe it goes back and forth. One person says one thing, the other person responds. It's kind of like ping pong. knocking the ball back and forth until it just sometimes reaches a point where there isn't much more to say. But you can remain with the question or whatever it is in almost a nonverbal state of inquiry. I don't really have any particular question on my mind tonight. Just sort of in an observant state of mind. Just seeing what everything looks like. Eventually it might be interesting if anyone ever starts watching these videos to have some questions that we could explore, maybe even questions that somebody comes up with that they want to talk about. That's always interesting. For me, in a lot of ways, I don't have so many questions anymore. I think I started off, everyone has tons of questions at some stage of their life, but I think in my pursuit of all these questions, one way or the other, through science or philosophy, religion, whatever it is, which I honestly have never deeply committed myself to any one thing. It's sort of my character, I guess, is that I tend to jump around from one thing to the next. And I think partly that's because I've never felt the need to become attached to anything. I've known people in my life who've been very attached to certain things, and then they almost obtain their identity through that attachment. When I grew up, I knew people who were fervently into Star Trek and, would act out various scenes, and, there's fan fiction and all that. And I see all these things now that are very similar. Sometimes people find their thing, whatever that is, and they stick to it, or they become an obsessed fan, or it does become almost sort of an obsession. I've run across things I've liked here and there, but couldn't really tell you that any one thing has stayed with me at any level where I feel that it has become an obsession or even a strong need. I've liked Stephen King books throughout my life. I've read them. Kind of interesting, but I don't know. I think that's why where I'm at now, it's like I don't really have anything that I identify myself with that's really beyond just this. In a lot of ways, I guess I've become dissatisfied with a lot of things in this material world, if you want to call it that. And partly, I guess, because I see things as they are, which is just this temporary and impermanent flow and flux. And at some point, it's like you drop these mental models or images you have of things as being things you need to acquire or possess or hold on to, because as the song says, we're all just dust in the end. And there's so much truth in that. All of this is just temporary manifestations of nature or the mind, and as such, they have some very brief temporary existence, I guess you could say, even though that is probably a stretch, and before you know it, they're gone. And everybody in your life will be gone one day, including yourself. Everything you possess will decay and turn back into the ground from which it came, every thought or idea that you've had, every memory you've had your whole life is stored in the brain and will be gone when the brain dissolves. And these are things you can observe pretty much as facts, but I don't think it's in a lot of time to people what that actually means. What are the consequences of that? You know, we delude ourselves. I would say distract ourselves. You know, we watch movies, we maybe drink alcohol or take drugs or read obsessively or do whatever it is we need to do to not think about our mortality or the temporary nature of all things. Because boy, if that really sank in, it challenges everything. Why is anything important? Why does anything take on any importance in that situation? But we have to be careful because the word nihilism came to mind. That we don't become nihilistic in the sense that everything we're doing here is still thinking. And I'm thinking about the impermanence of everything to the point where thought may reach the point that, well, nothing matters. So what does it matter what I do or say, or, you know, I'll just do whatever I want. I don't have to, you know, behave. I can misbehave. I can, whatever it is. And I think you have to stop short of that and again realize that thought is taking you down that path. We think we are nothing. We think of impermanence and we reach a conclusion like all things don't matter, nothing matters. There's no meaning and purpose to life, which is one conclusion you could reach. But why reach that conclusion? It's a process of thought. It doesn't change anything. Everything is still the way it is before you think that and the way it is after you think that, and it's just there for you to observe. And why not just do that? So whatever this world is, whatever it has, whatever meaning it may have, is there for you to see and observe, not think about or imagine. You can imagine meaning in life. You can also imagine no meaning in life. And neither of those is right. I can't recall specifics, but there were certain times when people would ask the Buddha some questions like, you know, so is there a self or is there not a self? And he would say nothing a lot of times. He wouldn't answer those questions directly because that is thought groping for an answer to a question, and it's not the reality, the truth. Even though these ideas are fundamental to Buddhism, you know, no self, what is it, anatta, anicca, and dukkha. The three fundamental principles of existence, 3 marks of existence, I believe they call them. If I get it right, I think anicca is impermanence. And these are Pali words. Pali was the language used by the Buddha, and you know, I'm no expert, but the Pali Canon, which is essentially the list of I don't want to say scriptures, or not scriptures, but Buddhist texts, suttas, that contain what Buddhists believe and supposedly record directly sometimes what the Buddha said, but we never quite know that. But there are certain things that stuck with me, and one are these 3 marks of existence, because they just make sense. You don't need to, this is another thing, you don't need to believe in any of this, you just observe. So, anicca, impermanence, we've talked all about that. That's very clear. Nothing has a permanent existence. Constantly changing. Physics tells us that, science tells us that, not a big surprise. Anatta, which is roughly translated, I suppose, as no self, I always think of as no permanent self, not no self at all. That is simply an extension of impermanence to ourself. If everything is changing, so am I. And everything that I'm composed of, materially and thought-wise and in every other wise, must be changing, is changing, if you observe it. If you observe your physical body, and we went through this, there's a particular sutta that I really like called the Satipatthana Sutta that in Buddhism some people say is the direct path to enlightenment. And again, we don't, in this group, we don't believe in paths to enlightenment, but what was interesting about it is that it was really all about observing your body, mind, and it went through a list of things, like a laundry list of things to observe about yourself, your internal makeup, your thoughts, your mind, and to observe these things as being impermanent. And there's a bit of wisdom to this, because, you know, just that observation of things being impermanent, really, I mean, it is sort of at the heart of it all. And then the third mark of existence is dukkha. Unless I'm getting this wrong, I'm pretty sure it is. And dukkha is essentially the dissatisfaction. I think the translation, sometimes it's translated as suffering, but I really like the dissatisfaction translation the best, because it also follows from impermanence, from anicca and anatta. These things are not three separate things, but if everything is changing, impermanent, has no permanent self, then everything is unsatisfactory in some way, in that it has no permanence, cannot be held, cannot be, you know, held onto or attached to. It slips through your fingers. You know, everything you have breaks, wears down, changes. I mean, this planet itself was formed in a solar explosion, a star exploding, you know, however countless billions of years ago, and now here we are, and then here we won't be at some point in the future in this cosmic dance. And when you see that, it's like, well, then again, this dissatisfaction of this material world, this world that we live in, samsara, as it's sometimes referred to in Buddhism. Just pulling in all these Buddhist words that are popping into my head today, but don't give them any special significance. They're just words. But some of this makes sense, you know. And this world is constantly changing, where there is a causality to everything. This is something else the Buddha actually figured out. Some very interesting things is that I think he said, this is because that is, and this is not because that is not. I can't recall the exact passage, but it's kind of a well-known statement of causality in the Pali Canon, in the earliest Buddhist texts. And it's actually very important, because he recognized that things in this world, there was a cause to everything. In this impermanent world where things are constantly changing, they're changing because of something. Everything has a cause. And even the Four Noble Truths essentially get at the fact that there is suffering, suffering has a cause, and because it has a cause, so dukkha, again, suffering being dukkha, or dissatisfaction, there's a cause to that dissatisfaction. That's the third noble truth. And then or the second. The first is simply a statement that there is dissatisfaction in the world. I mean, that's clear. The second is that the second noble truth being that there is a cause to that. The third noble truth being there can be an end to that, because anything that has a cause, remove the cause, you remove the thing, you stop the thing. If you have a disease and you know the cause, and you can eliminate the cause through medicine or surgery or some other means, you can interfere with that disease and stop it or whatever. Some little geeslings or goslings, whatever they're called here, being led across the trail. They have no interest in what I'm talking about, and rightly so. These guys look a little bigger over here. It's interesting. You can tell they're a different mom, different age group. These guys over here are like a little older. Mom's not happy. I'm stopping to take a look. Anyways, back to the Four Noble Truths. There is dissatisfaction in the world. There is a cause to dissatisfaction. Because of that, there is a cure for dissatisfaction. There can be an end to this. And then number 4, is where it gets a little prescriptive, and it claims the end, the Eightfold Path is the path to end this dissatisfaction. So, pretty good ideas, but it's this whole path idea and all that. And, again, these are okay. Now we have all these ideas in our head about things I just said, and they can get in the way. But, like I said before, the truth can't be arrived at through words, but the truth can use words or express itself in words in many different ways, right? An infinite number of ways. This may be one way in which truth has expressed itself, but you can't go the reverse. From the words find the truth, but from the truth you can find the words to explain it, even though they're not unique, and because the words are impartial, they can never capture the full truth, but maybe they can capture a fragment of it here and there, which isn't terribly useful. But anyways, this whole idea of dissatisfaction, dukkha, central to Buddhism, is not a terribly difficult concept, especially to a naive person like myself, to simply understand in your own life the various things you become dissatisfied with, which I was talking about earlier. Yeah, Star Trek is fun, but it's not my whole life. Watching movies, I've seen a few movies I like. Don't really obsess about anything, and I really have lost interest in a lot of movies. It's all, fantasy, it's distraction, it's not real. I suppose once you become more interested in truth and reality, you become less interested in all forms of distraction and illusion and delusion. Not because you've told yourself to, you just lose interest. It's not, the truth is much more interesting than fiction. And I'm much more interested in observing that, which I find here, every single day, which I find even just by observing my own mind, including how I can become distracted sometimes, how everyone can. So yeah, that's why I think where I'm at now, I don't really, not looking to improve, I'm not looking to become better, to reach anything. I'm pretty happy just for every day to be this, to experience and observe what's going on every day, which is a new day, and life and death constantly intertwined into creation, which is not something that happened once when the universe was created. It's happening all the time around us. So this creation is not like a mysterious thing, it's right in front of you. The constant evolution and change of things is creation. And if you see it, every day you see death, and every day you see life, and not as discrete events, but as a constant flow between one and the other, to where you almost can't distinguish them. And mixed up in all of this is love, which perhaps is, I don't know, I can't describe it. Could say it's the force that keeps everything moving, keeps this cycle constantly moving without effort. I mean, we often, well, here's a whole nother word just popped into my mind, order. We haven't talked too much about order, but there is an order to things. And we discover fragments of this order through science. You know, we develop so-called laws of science or physics, which can explain how certain things work. But these laws can never explain how everything works. There is no single law for that. And physicists search for, you know, the unified theory, the grand unified theory, whatever this may be. But even in that framework, whatever they come up with can never be complete. It doesn't explain the infinite, you know, complexity and diversity of life. Like, you may come up with a law that you think explains everything, but then that law doesn't explain the tree in front of me. I mean, you can say, oh, well, sure it does. If you had a computer and you ran a simulation and simulated the entire evolution of the universe from the beginning to now, which is impossible to arrive at that tree in front of me, which is an absolute fact and truth of the moment. The law doesn't tell you that. And sometimes I think people treat these laws of physics, they really are, it's belief, again, belief in a law that can explain everything. And these laws, these equations are used almost to just explain the results of experiments. I mean, we perform experiments, we observe, we develop relationships to explain what we observe, we write it down as a law. It's the extrapolation of that law then beyond the experiments, which is where we get into trouble. So biology, for example, could be regarded as being just physics. Is it really? I mean, it's a large leap to say that everything we see in the beauty of life is just, could be obtained by solving a mathematical equation. I don't believe that. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you'd realize why that isn't true. And again, for the very reason that a word is not the thing, right? The word tree is not the actual tree. These equations of physics are not reality. They are constructs of the mind, tools that help us solve certain engineering and mathematical problems, and that's it. And this is why I became dissatisfied, to use that word again, with physics as being the way to understand the world. But at one point, that's where I was. I was of the understanding that I would I would figure out this world by studying physics, because it explained a lot of things. Which is where it starts, right? You get an explanation. But then to realize the explanation is not truth. It's partial truth. It's limited. And this also brings up the distinction between invention and creation. You know, invention is what we do with knowledge. We invent little trinkets and toys and mechanical things and, you know, phones and all these other things. It's invention, but that's not creation. Creation is something completely different. It is what is happening all the time in this world, naturally. You know, this universal flow of everything, constantly transforming, versus invention, which is this limited thing that with our limited knowledge we make things. But we don't even, we can't make a tree even. I mean, we can't make life is so infinitely complex that just the observation of that, and then realizing how far we are from truly understanding life, from this realm of knowledge, you just reach this epiphany, so to speak, that is not the way. The search for knowledge never ends, is never complete, but we continue doing it. Maybe with the thought that one day I could discover everything, but like intelligence comes into play at some point and says, hold on, you're never going to reach that. You're not going to reach the infinite through a finite series of steps. It's an important point to reach, because then, well, okay, then how do I? But again, that asking how is the wrong question, because how do I reach the infinite? How do I understand the infinite? It's still within the realm of thought. It's still wanting a thought-based explanation. It's not there. It's not in that realm of thought. It's not to be understood that way. Period. End of discussion. Can't do it. But that's the realization. The realization of the limitation of knowledge is the understanding of the infinite. And letting it go and not striving for that anymore. And that's it. We talked about this the other day. There's no process to ending knowledge. There's no process either. It is insight is an immediate, it's not of time. So it's not something you can say happens at any particular time, but insight is like a flash. It is an understanding without a cause. It is an understanding that is just there, or realized in some way, but not a thing in the sense that a thought has a cause. We talked about the cause of a thought is memory. Right? Memory is, thought is a reaction to memory. So thought does have a cause. It has a chain, an event, one event leading to another. Sensory input, interacts with stored memory and does its thing and produces thought, and then one thought leads to the next thought, and it's just you get caught, right? It's a process, just like any other process in the material world, that is not controlled by you. It is simply occurring. This is another very important thing. Thought is a process that is occurring, not you thinking. There's no you that's directing your thought. Thought is not like that. It is just like any other causal process that, it is just a reaction. Light comes into your eye, goes into your brain, triggers some neurochemical response. And at no point is there a me in that process that says, okay, let me interpret that. This is where, no, it's occurring. It's a process. It's occurring. This is also why, you're not responsible. You are not to be judged for what you're thinking, or, oh, I should have done this, or I should have done that. That is all just nonsense. It's your brain playing games with you and pretending that you have the ability to change thought, which is, again, just another reaction. It's a very complex system, but it is all just a reacting biochemical system. So don't give it any more significance than that. And the understanding of that thought is this process, is this mechanical process, is freeing, right? Because it frees you from all this guilt and all this complexity that you don't need, and you let it go. I'm not worried about that anymore. I'm not worried about, and just so, but what's interesting is observe it, because it's an amazing, beautiful thing. It's just not your amazing, beautiful thing. It is just amazing and beautiful, along with everything else in this universe, and that is beauty. there is a beauty in the ending of the self, in the understanding, which only occurs when you understand the temporary self as a process, not a permanent thing. And then in the understanding of the self as a process, there is a beauty that can arise through that understanding, which is freedom, free from all thought processes, being outside or free, not outside, just understanding. It's not anything more than understanding what you really are, what this all is. Not understanding it bit by bit, which is analysis, but understanding it holistically as just everything, all at once, right here and now, nothing else. Not the next second, not the past, all now. And then there's an end to knowledge, an end to that seeking. And then there is beauty, and then there is love. Beauty, love, freedom, intelligence, order are one and the same with the ending of the self. And then when, the self, which can also be thought of as the center of our being, the psychological center, the me, the I, and how limited is the viewpoint of the me and the I, how small, when there's such immensity to everything. Why limit yourself to yourself? Like, why do that? It's like you're living in a groove or a very small channel when the entire universe is there to be seen and observed as one undivided whole, which in fact is the name of one of David Bohm's books. He, as we talked about, he had many conversations with Krishnamurti and was involved in the foundation and strove, I think, to unify physics in a lot of ways. And one of the books that he wrote, the last book he wrote before he passed away, is called The Undivided Universe. And it's a physics book. It's quantum mechanics. It's an ontological interpretation of quantum mechanics, and it's very interesting. I honestly have not made it through the entire book yet, but the parts that I've read are interesting if you're into that sort of thing. It's not necessary to understand anything, but if you have familiarity with physics and quantum mechanics and all that, there's a beauty in that presentation, which I won't go into any of that. It's not relevant here. But just the title of that book was what was interesting, The Undivided Universe. And if you think about it, that must be ultimate truth, a whole. Because division, every sort of division is artificial, not true. So what is true is the absence of all division, which is an undivided whole, the undivided universe. But that can't be an idea. That's just an idea. To say those words means nothing. To understand the undivided universe in all of its undivided glory is truth. But you can't think of it as truth, because that's not truth. Thinking of truth is not truth. But that understanding, however it may come to be, or already is, or whatever there is, it's simply that. There's nothing else to it. Undivided whole. Done. oh, okay, well, doesn't seem like much. But it's everything. And there's another concept in Buddhism called sunyata, which is emptiness. And there's I almost forgot about this, but a very interesting sutta in Mahayana Buddhism called the Heart Sutra, which says emptiness is form and form is emptiness. And again, just words, but there's so much in those words, right? Like the words don't say much, but if there is insight, those words can mean everything. And in those few words, emptiness, which in some sense is nothingness, is no thingness, not being a thing. Form is a thing. You know, form is when things take a form. You know, a tree is a form, we are a form. A form, however, is not permanent. We talked about that. And so, in that sense, it is empty of a permanent existence. So you could even say the forms that we see are empty of this permanent existence. And saying emptiness is form and form is emptiness is, in that sense, connecting a thing with nothing and seeing that they are the same. And that is perhaps a realization that one can have. And then to see the world in this ever-changing, transforming form that in itself is empty. So a lot of words that mean nothing and maybe mean everything. Take your pick. Just words, which again are just chains of thought occurring one after the other. Just as I put one foot in front of the other, one word comes after the other, and here we are, however many minutes later. Guessing about 40 minutes. Let's see how long I've been jibber-jabbering. 42 minutes, yeah, about right. So I think it's about time to stop jibber-jabbering. It's getting dark. It's just beautiful being out here. That's the most important thing. I love walking, seeing the sunset as I walk, and all the while, as these thoughts are just swirling around in my head, you know, nature is surrounding me saying, hey, I'm here, pay attention. And I am paying attention, but I'm also paying attention to my mind, this mind, not my mind, paying attention to this mind as it creates this word stream. You know, and that process of creating words is also a beautiful thing. If you see it for what it is, just don't take it too seriously. And then you're okay. Don't take anything too seriously, because there is nothing to be serious about. Then you're free from worry about anything ending, because things are constantly ending. So what are you worried about? So another interesting thing is death, right? Maybe not the right time to talk about it at the end of this, but you know, we often see death as something occurring off in the future somehow. I'm alive now. This is definitely got to be a topic of another video. We'll go into this because, well, fear and death, I suppose we haven't gone into any of these. Because our greatest fear is likely the fear of death. What is death? What is fear? And understanding these things, there can be an end to fear. And in a sense, an end to death, when death is seen as nothing, you know, instead of death being this thing, like, you know, we assume there's this me that exists and there's an ending of me at some point in the future that we call death. And there's a time interval between now and that death. And we're nervous and we're scared of it and whatever. Why? And perhaps one way to not have that fear of death is to bring death to the present moment, not as something far off in the future, but as something now. And then, as we talked about earlier, life and death being this intertwined cycle of transformation, death is not this mysterious thing. It is simply another change, another stepping stone that is always occurring, not in some distant future. So there's nothing to be worried about because you're dying right now. So welcome to the party. If you're dying now, then what are you worried about? So anyways, topic for another day. It doesn't change how beautiful everything is right now. I love twilight. The twilight, the dimming of light, as one day ends in preparation for another day to begin. And the ending of one thing is always the beginning of another. Okay, let's end it there so we can begin again. Have a good evening wherever you are.